Good morning, guys and gals. Today we're going to talk about adrenal fatigue. Um, it's one of those things that on a cloudy day and things like that, all the stressors that we're all too familiar with, all the things that have happened for the last couple of years, things that's going on in Ukraine, just life in general, those stressors obviously can cause what's known as adrenal fatigue. And as you've seen in all the videos and stuff like that, Western science doesn't recognize that. But you know, that's Western science. They don't recognize a whole lot of things that have anything to do with out making a whole lot of cash. Um, Lots of science, you bet, but science today is just a little more based on power and control and money than unfortunately it is based on pure science. But these things have been addressed for many, many, many years and have been effective. And one of the things is it's near free to test, because the supplements and the diets and the changes that need to be made are very easily made up to you. So one of the things is, in the videos that I've seen over the years, I've talked about adrenal fatigue for some time. I've read my first book, which I'm going to share with you guys, Adrenal Fatigue by Dr. Wilson. And that book was excellent, but I'm going to try to narrow down a couple things instead of having to read all the books, narrow down a couple of supplementations that are critical to take. The other one is Dead Doctors Don't Lie. I've talked about that with Dr. Wallach, and he gives a couple ideas there too. But basically, when it boils down to it, you're talking about mega intakes of vitamin C to bowel tolerance. We've talked about that before. Bowel tolerance is something I've discussed with people for probably the last 15 years at least, especially when we're talking about the vitamin C great Dr. Levy. He's talked about that many times in many different diseases, viruses, fungus, bacteria, and just chronic disease, going after that with megadoses of vitamin C to bowel tolerance. In essence, basically what it means is you take enough vitamin C throughout the day to where you start getting loose stools, and then you go slightly back, and that's the regimen that you stay with for some time until the illness is overcome. So in both of these books, and what you'll see is one of the critical things, the most critical thing is when a lot of stress occurs, is that the adrenals use up tons of vitamin C. So of course that's got to be replenished. It gets used up very, very quickly. So obviously the adrenals have to have that vitamin C replenished, and that's up to you how to do that, to find a really good vitamin C with bioflavonoids. Usually it's about a 2-to-1 ratio of ascorbic acid and bioflavonoids, which makes it work better. I've had this argument for some time about all the studies that have been done throughout the last 90 years or so have just been using ascorbic acid or sodium ascorbate. But yes, bioflavonoids, I would totally agree that makes it more bioavailable. But when you talk about the molecule itself and getting after it, there are certain things that need to be done now, and that's when you need to get your vitamin C pretty much at all costs. But find yourself a good vitamin C with bioflavonoids in it, and get that started immediately. There is a test that you can do, the Orthostatic Hypotension test, and it's hard to show you here, but basically what you do is you lie down for about 5 minutes in a relaxed state, and then you stand up real quick, and then you put your cuff on to check your blood pressure, and your systolic, which is the first number, should rise about 10 points beyond where you were at rest. And at that point, if it does not, the chances are you do have adrenal fatigue. It's an easy test. You know, there's an iris test. There's a couple other tests that I'll try to share with the description, in the description, and you can do that. But that test is a pretty fairly easy one. I would again suggest this adrenal fatigue book, because to me that was one of the best books, one of the best reads I've ever had, especially when it comes to chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue. Granted, two different things by and large, but it's a very helpful book and tells you what's available out there. So I'm narrowing that down for us. So again, vitamin C, top of the list. After that, we're talking about a B complex 50, which is critical. And in that B complex 50 is important as they all are. Niacin is right up there on the top of the B vitamins. It is the B3 vitamin, which is very critical for adrenal function. Adrenal glandular extracts, and those simply are extracts from the adrenal glands of pigs, cows, different animals like that. And those can be extremely helpful and very safe instead of using synthetics. Zinc Gluconate, 25 to 50 milligrams. That's something I take every day on that order. It's very easy to tolerate. Gluconate, in my view, is one of the best to use. Zinc picolinate is another great one. Magnesium glycinate or citrate. I always prefer magnesium glycinate, but magnesium is another one that's critical for the adrenals to be more functional. So again, I'll go over this real quick. Vitamin C, number one. And look up bowel tolerance if you have any questions on that. Otherwise, again, buy that book, The Adrenal Fatigue. It's, I don't know, probably 20 years old by now, but it's an excellent book. I just reread a little bit of it, and it's worthwhile. Vitamin C, B complex, magnesium, adrenal glandular extracts, and zinc gluconate. And some of the best herbs. I don't talk about herbs enough, and I should. I don't use a lot of herbs other than the fact I use a ton of natural, fresh herbs out of the garden and stuff like that, but I don't, as far as herbs, valerian root and a few others are about all I use as medicinal use, but there are many that are just terrific to use out there. The top one, especially in this book, they consider being the top one, is licorice root. I've used that in the past. It can be very effective. So licorice root is one, ashwagandha is another one, ginkgo biloba, ginseng, and ginger. Now the last one I'll touch on here, you guys, once again, you know how much I love iodine, and I'm going to do this to the day I die probably, is talk about how everybody needs iodine. We already know that 96% of Americans and most of the world is deficient in iodine, according to the best of the best, which is Dr. Brownstein, Fleckus, and others. So you've got to get your iodine. You got to supplement that with selenium methionine too to make that work real proper as far as the T4 to T3 conversion for the thyroid molecule. But they found, and it's cited in this book, that 80% of all adrenal issues have to do with first having thyroid issues. And when you're talking about thyroid issues, bottom line, ultimately, I don't care whether it's nodules, whether it's cancer, whether it's cysts, whatever it is, just hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, whatever it is, the chances are you're highly deficient in not only the selenium, but of course in the iodine. And what better than iodine Lugol's iodine solution, which is iodine, potassium iodine. There are few solutions better than that, and very inexpensive, incredibly safe, been around for a couple hundred years, and it's something that you should absolutely consider taking, especially when you're talking about adrenal fatigue and just health in general. What you do though, when you're taking vitamin C and iodine, you always separate that. Iodine, Lugol's solution iodine, is both an antioxidant and an oxidant. So the vitamin C would just make the iodine a little less, the iodine part of it, which is the oxidized part of it, a little less effective. So it doesn't hurt anything as far as we know, and it's been used together for decades and decades and decades. But the key is just to try to separate them by some time, because vitamin C has a very short half-life anyway. So separate that by a couple hours in your usage throughout the day, and you're going to find yourself probably some pretty good wellness and health. Okay, we'll leave it at that. All right, thanks. See ya.